Welcome, everybody, to Before the Commit, episode 20. Wow. This week, we'll be talking about Claude Code SDK as well as Claude Code 2.1, although there's a few incremental fixes that have come out already. We'll also be talking about Apple picks Gemini for Siri. We've talked about this in the past. Sounds like they've made up a decision. And in the Kill 'em chain, we'll talk about slop squatting, a very interesting way to attack an LLM or maybe to attack your code base. With me, as usual, I have my friend Dustin Hillgartner. Hey, Dustin, how you doing?
Hello.
So, before we get into it, Anthropic, a little drama this week on Anthropic. People kind of, if you aren't familiar, there's kind of, not you, but the audience, there's kind of two different models, the way that, Anthropic sells usage for Claude Code or Claude itself. You can either buy like a developer license that is like a consumption-based model that uses API keys. You have a dashboard. You can decide how to kind of meter all of that, where they meter it and how you govern usage. And then there's the sort of subsidized model, which is very similar to how Cursor actually sold off their services, which is a flat rate, and then there's some kind of mechanism they use for governing your usage. So there's, Claude Pro, Claude Max 5X, Claude Max 20X. I use the 20X one just because I'm doing a million things right now. But yeah, so apparently there's a couple of different third parties that are using the non-API approach in order to kind of give out usage. So they're basically kind of, I guess, violating the terms of service in some respects. Anyway, there's a little bit of kind of back and forth. Some people defending, one side of it versus the other. I won't name any specific people. But yeah, it's just kind of interesting to see, obviously, I mean, I think LLM providers, companies, are going to have to come down on their prices. The pricing is only going to get more competitive. Even you're seeing Gemini starting to give away stuff for free. Google, obviously a little late to the party, but it really hasn't seemed to matter. I mean, I think back in August, we were talking about, what's up with Google. And now, Gemini is, proving itself to be a kind of, caught right up. And doing just fine.
Yeah, it seems to be OpenAI that's taking the most arrows nowadays in terms of whether or not they're going to survive or doing well or whatnot. So as far as the Claude Code or Claude controversy, I mean, first off, I didn't even know that this was possible. I wasn't really in that world enough to realize that people were doing this.
Yeah, because essentially when you authenticate to Claude Code, you open up a window and it uses like some kind of OAuth or OIDC redirect. And then you get like a cookie, you never authenticate again. Like
you get like a session token or something.
Yeah, but when has your session ever expired? Like never. Have you ever had to re-authenticate? Like
I'm sure there's probably some amount of time that it expires on that's reasonable for a coding session. But what people were doing was they had another IDE that perhaps they wanted to use, or another coding agent or something or another, maybe their application. And they were essentially taking the established session from Claude Code and then, I'm probably probably automating it over there, but essentially copying it over to the other application and hijacking that session. Now, I haven't read the terms of service, but I imagine some of the folks are arguing that this wasn't in the terms of service or there was some sort of loophole. But I mean, from my perspective, when I heard about it, I was like, seems like something that you would get shut down for eventually, just because even though you might be following the terms of service, you're not following like the spirit of what they're doing there, which is they're trying to subsidize people who are using their application layer, right? If they wanted to subsidize people who weren't using their application, then they would have subsidized the API as well. Now, that was my exposure to it. And, I think that the fervor about it will die down because I think, it's not as black and white as they'd like you to, some of the people who are upset about it. But apparently it's shut down, major ways that people were using Claude Code. So I wonder if Claude Code will actually lose any business over this. Because I think that what they think is going to happen is that when they shut it down, everyone will move back to Claude Code and off of whatever IDE they were using, or they'll pay the unsubsidized cost.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I discovered is that people are actually using this for production applications. Like, it's not just development.
Wow. That's
yes.
That's a pretty wild way to run in production.
Well, like production in quotes, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I mean, people can tell me what they think, but just in my head, it seems obvious that you'd eventually get shut down for that. If you have a hijack a session in order to get a cheaper cost, you're probably doing something that wasn't expected. Now, I have my own issues with the way they have separated out subscriptions from API costs that challenge me on a daily basis that have nothing to do with session hijacking or anything like that. The issue I have is I would love to be able to use some of the features, like going back between background agents on the web and agents that are running in my IDE and be able to teleport them or transfer them back and forth. But I can't do that because the way they've bifurcated the system is like I'm on the subscription in Claude Code IDE, but in order for me to use the web, I have to be on the API, and those things don't talk to each other. So you can't get a subsidized background agent, right?
I see.
So that means that you're kind of like, in an odd technical way, barred from using those types of features, which is a shame. And then the other way it kind of sucks is that, let's say you're a company and you want to buy Claude Code for all your engineers. If you had been paying for their personal accounts and you want to rope them into a more org level account and start taking control over security at the org level, like you have to throw away your subsidization. And now the subsidization is actually pretty high. So it's like a very material change in price to go towards a more security oriented way of operating. So it's almost like, in a way, Claude is subsidizing less security for orgs. I'm saying if you're an individual, this doesn't affect you.
Yeah, I'm curious, like many organizations that kind of, are trying to push monetizing on more of an enterprise sales model, meaning like the reason why you're getting such a high rate is that the rest of the sort of business like can cover that cost. So I'm curious, like what other features are available in the enterprise or teams model that would make an organization say pay a premium on that versus saying, hey, just use your own personal account for work, which is, again, it's not great for security reasons.
That's what I'm saying. Like maybe in the future it'll get better. They'll start releasing more and more features in the teams and it will just become a no-brainer. But at the moment, they're basically the same with the exception being the background thing I was talking about. Basically the same plan, except for one is like, with a $200 Claude Code account, I think you can spend $1,000 or something like that. You're spending thousands of dollars for $200, mm-hmm. right? Whereas if you were in the org, you'd spend that thousands of dollars out of pocket, right? Mm-hmm. So right now it creates a situation where they're probably pushing a lot of orgs into personal accounts, mm-hmm. Which is a shame because of the security ramifications of that.
Right.
You have orgs with their data scattered all throughout personal accounts. So
that makes sense.
I'm not sure if they realize that, but if they don't, that's definitely the case.
I'm sure they're paying attention to all of this. And like I said, like if they aren't thinking about how to be competitive with pricing, they will not forever hold the lock. Like, for example, like what I wasn't aware of is that a reason a lot of these things are kind of getting exploited is that like not everyone believes Claude Code, which is just a command line tool, right? A good one, is not the only kind of tool on the block. Open Code is one of those other tools that allow you to use other LLMs along with it. So like the idea is that like you're not forced, you can use all the niceties of Claude Code without being forced to use an Anthropic model. And so like by virtue of Anthropic kind of building out like their own CLI, of course they're going to lock you, like their money is not in Claude Code per se. It's really in the consumption of the Anthropic models. So like however they get that money is like they can tune Claude Code to do a million tool calls. It's in their best interest because the more consumption of the model they create, they're kind of creating a self-perpetuating market. The open source community, well, you could argue that Claude Code is open source, but the truly pure open source community is like, well, we want to use whatever models we want. We want to have full control over how these tools actually work. And, you know, maybe Anthropic is being a little bit greedy in its token usage. So yeah, of course, you know, the open source world is good because it forces things to change sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And like the point I was trying to get at before I went off on a tangent was that, you know, what is preventing, you know, XAI or, you know, Gemini that has anti-gravity, you know, they have their own IDE coding agent. You know, Codex is a thing, or some new kind of player that says, oh, I'm going to write an open source tool that works with all the LLMs except Anthropic. So yeah, they have to figure this out. And like, we both know that like these costs are only going to go lower and lower because the marketplace is only going to become more commoditized.
I mean, I have a slightly different take, actually. I mean, okay. A little bit of an opposite take.
That's fine.
I think that Claude Code is where a lot of their IP is. It's not open source. I know there's Open Code, which is like an open source player. But I think that Claude Code is where a lot of their IP is.
Well, Claude Code CLI is open source, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
The command line tool is what I'm saying is open source. So like Open Code is just a clone of Claude Code. When you use Claude Code, you're locked into the Claude Code. You're locked into the Anthropic models, right? You can't use other models. Open Code is a clone of Claude Code, which is open source also, but is not locked into specific models. So what I'm saying is that like,
are you certain that I mean, maybe I missed this along the way, which is because that's actually
it's
awesome.
open source.
I'm gonna have to
the whole thing's
I'm gonna have to fork it then and check it out. I was under the impression, honestly, for quite some time that Claude Code was not open source. So I'll have to check it out. And
no, it is. But like the question is like, does the models, like the way that Claude Code is built, is locked into using Anthropic models or, you know, Bedrock or whatever Vercel.
Oh,
Is there
absolutely.
stuff?
Then I
Is
would
there
take
stuff
Claude
about
Code and
it
just port
that
it.
is like, yeah, but is there stuff
There are
about
features. There are
Yeah.
features that are specific to the Claude model, and there is like adapter type work you would have to do in terms of formats. Like for instance, Grok is not going to expect a Claude format.
Yeah, which is why open code was created. It was created like a
Yes.
Claude code that can do the same things, which is how this whole token thing came up. My point was like, yeah, there's
So
probably
now I
lots.
understand a little bit more about this story. Yeah, it makes even more sense why they're going to shut down Claude.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're hijacking the session and forking Claude code, now this actually inspires me because I've always wanted to have a Claude code that uses Grok, because I have theories that Grok is and probably also Gemini are just as good as Claude
perhaps
at coding, I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's differences in tool calling in terms of like the actual model versus Claude code. But I never realized that I had Claude code the fork the whole time. So now I will try to.
Yeah. So like maybe we should do an episode on like open code and like, or tools of the like, and like see where, because, you know, it's been a while since we looked at like another like integrated development environment. Like, you know, like I don't even use an IDE anymore. I just use Claude.
Let's do open code next week.
And
I'll have dug into it for quite some time at that point, for a week.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious to like, you know, use it against, you know, the Grok models and see, you know, give it one of your projects and see what it does. And I imagine that open code has implemented a lot of the same like capabilities that Claude has, like the ability to kind of create different mechanisms to improve your workflows, whether it be hooks or commands or, you know, tool calling, whatever it might be. So maybe we should just jump right into the Claude Code SDK and or Claude 2.1 features.
Well, really, let's go over to Claude 2.x features or 2.1x features. There's been a few minor fixed versions that have come out since 2.1.0, but the major features that you should consider with this release are really, there's kind of like a convenience feature in the sense that skills will auto load. So it used to be you'd have to close. Oh, nice. Yeah, because it's a real pain in the butt, especially if you're working on the skill. I mean, every single time you change the skill a little bit,
basically, right?
Yeah,
like
and you want to website. Yeah, you want to try it out right away again. You gotta, you know, Control C out of Claude. Then you got to open Claude. Then you got to do resume, and then you got to go back, you know, into your session, and then run the skill again. And then if it doesn't do what you want it to, you got to do that whole process over again.
Right.
So now, if you make a change to a skill, both at your home directory Claude folder or in your project Claude folder, it'll just hot load right there. That's a cool convenience feature. Also, MCP tools hot load now. So if you have an MCP server and you add a tool to it, it'll just hot load. You don't have to restart Claude once again. And
now, does that include everything in like your tilde Claude directory or local Claude directory?
It doesn't.
Okay.
And I believe that's by design. I don't think it works for commands, like things that could be / commands. I'm not 100% sure, though. I'm going to have to test that, because in the release notes, it only says skills. It doesn't mention commands. So I know commands had the problem too. So I don't know if they left that unfixed or if they just didn't call it out. So I'll have to check that. So not yet sure if it's everything in the Claude folder, but the release notes don't mention it being everything in the Claude folder. Now, another interesting feature for security folks out there, well, two things for security folks. One is there's a security fix that stopped the potential for there to be sensitive information that could be exposed in the debug logs. So the debug logs have some sanitization of some sensitive things that people have found. And then another thing is more granularity on the ability to allow or disallow tools and skills. So that gives the security team more knobs to limit blast radius on certain things. And then really kind of, in my opinion, the major feature that came out is the ability to fork. So not only can you fork context, I think there's a manual way to fork, which is a way to kind of go off on a tangent, but you can set skills or sub agents so that they are forked agents. And what that means is that they will be able to, well, I think it's only really a feature for skill, I guess. It's sub agents are automatically forked. You're automatically operating in a fork with the sub agent. It's always been the case. But you can now have skills operate as kind of like a sub agent fork. Now, you might say, well, what does that mean? It means that they will operate like a sub agent, which means that their internal dialogue will not fill up the main thread's context. It'll be off on a tangent, which is useful for a lot of cases, like, let's say, skills that are doing things like running tests or something like that, or a skill that, for instance, I have a skill that does playwright tests without the playwright syntax. It's like just a markdown file of playwright steps, and then I just tell it to go run through that, and it manipulates the browser and clicks on things and goes through and does end-to-end tests. Now, some people will say, well, why don't you code that up in playwright, syntax? And my answer was, well, I just wanted to see if it worked. And B, it's a little bit more resilient because it's like a chain of thought test of your product, as opposed to a class is missing, so I'm going to fail type version, a brittle version of your test. Now, both tests are valuable. You want the brittle version for obvious reasons that we all know throughout the years of development. But sometimes you just want like the equivalent of like a human just going through and seeing if something works. And you can kick it off in the background and it'll come back later and say, oh, I finished, or overnight or something like that. Especially with Ralph Wiggum and stuff like that, you can get a lot of that type of testing done overnight.
Do you use notifications like webhooks to notify you when your loops are done, or if they're running long? Like, what's your kind of like workflow? Like, I'm using, not a Ralph Wiggum loop. I'm using like my own shell command. I think I showed you earlier. But yeah, like I get Slack notifications from like when basically I have my loop like comment on Ponder, which is the notification system I wrote, or the management system. And then anything that Ponder has is basically a Slack notification to like a private, the free Slack or whatever. You can do it also for Discord.
Yeah. I think you have a more sophisticated setup than I do.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering about like notifications.
I have like the ding fries are done.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I just have like ding.
You don't wire it up to Slack.
Then I got to click through 9 IDEs to figure out which one it was. But yeah, so I could probably do some tooling in that area. But yeah, you have like deep ability to build what you want in that area. So yeah, it's a pretty good feature. But that's been there for some time. It's not in this latest release. The context forking is probably one of the major features. So let's move over to, I'm going to briefly talk about Claude Agent SDK. So this is This is I'm not sure how new this is. I noticed it had gotten some fanfare recently, and I was aware of the ability to call Claude code in Python for some time now, because I think it was kind of like in a beta, like, oh, by the way, you can also use this SDK, but it's really started to get pushed recently, and I started looking into it, and it's like for the folks out there that are used to like LangChain and LangGraph and have maybe messed around with N8N or one of the other no code solutions where you can build your own agents and essentially you're at the end of the day you're making a call to a provider and then you're orchestrating tool calls and things like that. This is like all of that. It's like all of that. It's in that world, right? So you imagine you're at the sort of code level Python. You're going to do like a LangGraph graph or LangChain, except for instead of calling out directly to Claude, you're calling out to Claude code. So it's able to orchestrate tool calls. It's able to do a whole bunch of things. So it's kind of like instead of each of your nodes in that graph being a individual call to an LLM, and then maybe a loop of some sort going through tool calls. Now it's like you have Claude code as that node. So that's incredibly powerful, and it's something that I'm pretty interested in trying out and messing around with it, because now you can build LangGraph, like solid graphs that then also leverage Claude code. So I really do think that probably the next generation of applications, some of the next generation of applications will be built in this way.
Well, there was a release yesterday or the day before, a new product called Anthropic Cowork.
Yeah.
And apparently the whole tool is built on top of the SDK.
Yeah. It's all built on top of it. So, and by the way, another rumor, which I think was confirmed if you look at the source code, I think all of Claude Work was built in a month. I think it was like Cowork or
Cowork,
something.
you mean?
Was built in like a couple of weeks or something, or a month. At least that's.
Yeah, I think the general idea is that like people are using Claude code for things other than coding. Like,
yes,
we talked about it a bit last week after the podcast was over about, the ability to kind of treat your operating system, your file structure like a database, to give it files. I mean, Claude code is really good at reading just markdown files, like, and following instructions, and then being able to assemble, other contexts and respond to all types of questions. So, I mean, I'm using Claude code for like, writing all kinds of information or asking all other types of questions once I give it the correct context.
Yeah. So now, like if you had a to-do app and you wanted to have the to-do app actually do the to-dos, you're like you're 4 lines of code. You're 4 lines of code away from having Claude code do it for you. So yeah. It's pretty awesome. Yeah,
exactly.
Now, obviously, I'm simplifying it a little bit, but not much. Go ahead.
That's exactly what I'm doing now. Like the to-do app is essentially orchestrating Claude code to go and do other things. Now, I'm not using Cowork. I wrote my own Cowork just because. Yeah.
Are you using the agent SDK though?
No. I haven't found a need to use it. Like, I just run the command line tool in a loop. Like, I have my own Ralph Wiggum. I mean, I might put Ralph Wiggum inside the loop in case I have like the loop wraps the Claude command line tool, but I might just have it pass the Ralph Wiggum like / tool or whatever the command. And for really long tasks, like it would just use Ralph Wiggum if it needed to. And if not,
there's an absurd number of ways to use Claude code.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because what I found myself doing, like, I know we're kind of taking a little bit of a tangent, is what I found myself struggling with is exactly what you're saying is I'm hitting a theoretical like ability to keep track of all the things I'm working on because like a month ago I was not working on as many things in parallel as I am now. Like I'm doing like 20 or 30 different tasks in parallel, but because I'm context switching so fast, I needed to map what I'm working on like to work that's actually being executed. So like being able to start the work and kind of map it back to like a task has been like a game changer for me. Like this is like 2 days now doing this.
Yeah.
Because like you said, like you're sorting through like 10 different IDEs, like, and you're doing different types of work. You might be coding, you might be writing, you
Yeah.
know, responses to someone's question. You might be drawing pictures or whatever have you. Being able to orchestrate all of that from a single kind of pane of glass. And then, you know, next is to like wire it up to like documents and email because not
Yeah.
everything's harvested yet in the directory. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was joking around on a call with a coworker the other day. I was like, I have like 9 or 10 IDEs open right now. It's like 5 years in the past, if an engineer had come to me and said they're working on 10 different things at the same time, I'd be like, okay, so you're probably making progress on none of them. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But now I feel like I'm making progress, the same amount of progress I would prior to these tools. I'm making as much progress as I would if I was doing 2 projects at the same time, but on all 10, you know?
Yeah. What I'm trying to do is cut down on there's still an expense like that I pay time wise on
Yeah.
context switching. So what I'm
Yeah.
trying to do now is reduce the expense on the context switching, and like it's working. Like obviously everybody has their own way of doing that, but once I can further drive down that expense, the more benefits, because at some point like I'm actually losing speed because of the context switching. There's an
Yeah.
overhead cost.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading a post that someone made that I thought was pretty good one-liner. It was like, with all these productivity increases, you know, an AI is supposed to be doing all this work for us. I feel like I've never worked harder in my life. And I feel like that's so true. And, you know, for the folks out there that say, you know, that this is going to
Job
lead
loss,
to
job replacement.
job loss or something like that. I think that every engineer is going to become far more valuable and far more productive. And I feel like if you're far more valuable and far more productive, and you work in a growth company, which most engineering companies are, then you're not going to get rid of something that's more valuable than it was yesterday. Now, if you're in a value company where it's all about, you know, the more money you make is about limiting your cost of goods sold, then I could imagine that there's probably going to be some layoffs in those areas. But if you're in a growth industry, they're more likely to hire more engineers than they are to lay off engineers. I mean, if your engineers become 10 times more productive and you lay off engineers, you're kind of admitting you're not a growth company.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, I have too many people. My vision is limited enough that I can't think of anything to use these excess engineers on.
Yeah, I think it also depends upon some other factors. I mean, I generally agree with what you're saying, but like if you're somebody that is like an AI like anti-hype person, or you're an organization that is still doesn't have an AI policy or isn't creating a pathway for people to learn it, or you're an engineer that is not embracing it, you'll find yourself having to compete with other engineers that are able to do markedly more in the time period than you are. So like where things change is that you still need humans to program the AI. It's like computers won't take away your job just yet because you still need people to program it. Now in the future, like could you have a robot that does it on behalf of more humans? Like, you know, I instruct a robot that is able to build other agents, like agents of agents, sure. But you still need humans behind that. So to me, it is the very skilled humans that are able to keep their jobs or to create more value. People who are unskilled, who are not skilling up, or in organizations that are highly restricted to them using these tools, then yeah, I would say that those are the highest risk software engineers right now.
I
And
think
probably in most industries, it's the same.
I think if you're a senior engineer and you're not interested in AI at all, then I think that over time your value will go down. I think if you're a company and you're not interested in a software company and you're not interested in AI coding at all, I think eventually your engineers will have motivation to go move elsewhere because they feel like they might be not getting the skills they need in order to further their career. Now, I think that right now is the perfect time to learn these skills because they're starting to really get good. You know, there was a period of time, maybe a year or two ago, where you're truly like an early adopter. You're putting up with some nastiness in order to get to the prize. I think right now is probably the hardest time it is for junior engineers because they have the dual problem of like being inexperienced and also not knowing how to use AI coding tools because they just came out, like everyone else doesn't know. But I think the next generation of junior engineers, if they all learn how to do AI coding tools, then in some cases they may take jobs away from senior engineers who haven't learned those AI coding tools in the past year or two. So something to think about. You know, obviously every business is different. I mean, there's people still doing COBOL, so there's probably a long tail to everything. So yeah, I mean, that seems to be how it's going to go. And as far as pricing goes, like to go back to the pricing we were talking about, and I was saying that Claude Code is the IP before I realized they open sourced it. I really do think that the price of engineering goes down to the price of electricity. It trends towards it over time, I should say. I think that's really the way most things will trend, is towards the price of electricity over time. So I agree with you that the pricing will go down in the long run.
Yeah, and certainly people will try to eat up market share by, you know, especially those that have fat pockets. They can do the play of, you know, the freemium model, like Google, for example, giving away Gemini 3 fast for nothing. Or like, you know, dangling out like, yo, you can generate like 10 free nano banana images a day, you know, something like that, where, you know, it becomes a much more, and it's of course like it's baked into the entire Google ecosystem, which already Google has all these Gmail users, so on and so forth. Speaking of Google, you know, I think it was probably around episode 1 or 2 that we were talking about where's Google on all this. I think it was in the context of I actually went back and watched episode 1. We were really polished actually from the beginning.
Is that a great way of saying we haven't gotten any better?
Well, no, this is a very you know, like watching episode 19 and watching episode 1 is like the product is very consistent. Like the music is the same, the platform is the same. So like you would never know that like we've been doing this since July. So whatever you
We're
want
in
to
the
take
fastest moving industry and our podcast hasn't changed.
Well, I mean, it could just be, it's just good the whole time. Like there's nothing to really improve.
It's timeless.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, so for those that are not aware, like Apple's really kind of doing nothing, you know, Siri's integration with AI is crappy. Like you can't even ask Siri, like, you know, a question that you can ask any other model, right now from your phone. Like it's terrible. Like Apple intelligence is garbage.
I got out of the shower this morning and I yelled across the room to my phone, "Hey Siri, what's the temperature today?" And it said, "I can't see your location." I was like, what the fuck? I was like, aren't you like the phone? Like, aren't you like in touch with Apple? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. It's terrible. So yeah, Apple is joining forces with Google. Essentially, it is going to be their foundation model. So somehow, some way, you will have a local Gemini model running on your phone, and it will be the processing engine. The terms of the deal, Apple didn't comment. However, they're apparently going to pay $1 billion a year to utilize their AI. So yeah, very interesting.
Just goes to show you how important the founders are in some cases. I just don't feel like Apple has done anything since Steve Jobs. I can't think of one thing.
Well, the Apple Watch, if you want to call it something like
was valuable. That something that was
it was after
it was
he passed.
Wholly outside.
Now, you don't know, like
it wasn't like a plan, like Steve Jobs, like
it could have been. Thing. Yeah. It could have been, but yeah, I mean, wearables could have been on his radar. Like, I don't know that the iPad was his thing either. That also might have been after his time. I mean, the iPad is the latest iPad is the incredibly powerful. It's the M5 chip is amazing. Like, you can actually run pretty powerful models locally.
Yeah, and I shouldn't really talk about like the M5 chip. A lot of the things they're doing on a chip level and perhaps the iPad and things like that are awesome. But it's just like, I guess it's just an overall feeling that like something about the magic is gone. Like they become more about like figuring out how to get me to buy an extra cord every year.
Yeah, it's incremental. Like, it's nothing like, Apple Music, Apple TV, like the actual shows. Like, there's some great content out there. The Apple Watch for sure. But but it's also not Steve Jobs. Like, it'll never be Steve Jobs. So some of that is like, you can't, just the brilliance of the man, you just can't recreate that ever. It was, no one will ever be like him. And so, yeah, the expectations are high. But yeah, I agree. I feel like the Apple Vision Pro, like the idea behind VR goggles is pretty much like a dead concept. The future is much more reasonably wearable items like glasses. Like,
I think it's too bad that Steve Jobs didn't survive till AI, and we could have seen what his vision for it was.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, maybe this is Apple. It's not Apple actually doing. I mean, it's interesting because Apple's biggest competitor for like an operating system is Google, and yet they're partnering with them. I mean, you do this stuff all the time in business. You make decisions where you declare bankruptcy. Maybe in the future, like for many years, Apple didn't make their own chips. They bought them. They included them from Intel, and then eventually decided that we want to merge the experiences of the phone and the tablet and the laptop. And you're actually seeing the tablet and the laptop merging closer and closer together. And I would imagine over time, like, those become one thing. And the phone as well. The phone, I think, if you've seen the iPhone, what is it, 18 is a foldable phone. It's a foldable phone. So it's more like a tablet now. So I don't know why I kept doing that over and over again.
So next keynote is going to be like the iTop.
The iTop.
It's an iPad with a keyboard, and it fits on your lap.
Or the Pad Top Pro.
The lap pad. The eye lap pad.
Oh man. All right, before we close it out, yeah, we'll move on. Before we close out, I want to talk about in the Killam chain something called slop squatting, right? It's a lot of different things. The basic example that I could give is um, there is because of the probabilistic nature of LLMs, that an LLM could hallucinate the name of a package. So what some people have done is figured out what those names were, and then they went and created packages with those names. On the off chance that you essentially wind up importing the code that does said thing, but also does a bunch of other things that it's not supposed to. Yeah. And most LLMs are not going to check to see by virtue of the thing I think a lot of people don't get is that like Claude Code just writes code. It doesn't do anything else out of the box. This is why ModSecOps is important, is you need all these other defense in depth things. One of the things that you would add is something that checks the reputation of said package, that it's been around for a while, that it exists, that it's real, that you're checking things about it, who created it, so on and so forth. Whereas most people would just, as their vibe coding without checking context, like without guardrails, like there's a good kind of vibe coding that you can do. And there's a bad kind of vibe coding, which you can do, which is just like blindly accepting results without any guardrails whatsoever. So this is one of those kind of attacks that you could face without you even realizing it.
I've seen this. In fact, I think we spoke about this many years ago, or not many at this point, but a year or two ago, because in the early versions of Cursor, I saw Cursor do this to me, where it hallucinated a package that, of course, I couldn't pull. But it was like a plausible package, right? Like it seemed to believe it knew a lot about it. Now, this was in the early days of coding agents where they were just trying to figure out the context engineering, and they were kind of like incredibly hallucinatory back then. That's been, I haven't seen something like this in quite some time, but it made me think of it back then, because the first thing I thought when it hallucinated the package was, I was like, this is kind of like a typo squat, right? Like it's like the LLM might hallucinate this package for somebody else. And if you were, smart and mischievous enough, you could go and actually put that package there, and then everyone would be getting it, right?
Yep.
And then, you know damn well that the LLM is going to take one crack at running it before it figures out it's not the real thing or something it thought it was. So, there you go. So I think in the article I read, they were saying that China was doing this in an attempt to potentially, find some.
Yes, the PRC was doing this and is doing it, but again, like a kid could do it. It's like, doesn't have to be a state nation actor. Like, this is not, there's the barrier to entry for this type of attack is extremely low. And you might gain, like, say like they used to do the I forget the name of the malware, but there was a malware package that you would install that you would get installed on a website, and it would use some of the compute from your VPS in order to do calculations for blockchain, the mathematical equations required for blockchain. And then they would put them all together to try to mine for any kind of, currency backed by blockchain. So yeah, it could be for that reasons too. It doesn't necessarily have to be for data exfiltration. It could be, a different type of attack is not necessarily one for exfiltrating, but could be one for sabotage, meaning you can cripple a site, you could deface a site. Not every goal is nation state oriented, although that's certainly one goal.
Yeah.
So some of the mitigating things, I mean, I talked about, checking the number of stars on the various sites, like looking at npm.js or pypy.org, wherever you may pull a package, there's a community sort of behind these things that are, somewhat serves as a barometer for whether or not the package has been around a while and has somewhat of an audience. It's not a panacea, but it is a mechanism that you can use. Context 7 is another way if there's documentation about it, but that could also be faked. There's other, like an MCP server that hits like a real-time service that does maybe this type of checking. Yeah. And then there's also doing
you could also do kind of a traditional method of having like a quarantine area. I know this is more of a large enterprise thing, but I know that this has been done, with I'm trying to draw the vendor out, but it was like a JFrog, or something frog.
Artifactory.
Artifactory has like a firewall. And I think Nexus and everyone else has
Sonatype.
Yep. Yeah, you can put like a quarantine area where you're proxying the public repositories, and then your security team can manage new updates that come in, quarantine them, do scans on them, and then release them into the proxy so that the general public within their organization gets them. And it's like 1 degree of separation between you and the public repositories out there so that a team can assess, or you can have automation and stuff like that assessing packages.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a very interesting mechanism for being able to fake packages, and is very much like typo squatting, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, very, very interesting type attack. Yeah. So that's it. I think we got there. And so I think next week we will talk about open. This is 100% open source. So maybe there's something about Claude Code that it's not completely open source. I'm not sure.
I mean, it looks like it is. I just looked at it, but I'm going to certainly look into it. And
look at the notes on the bottom of the notes of open code. It says certain things, how it's different, but it seems to be like almost like a fork of Claude Code. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Take care.